Hello? Can you hear me? A small, timid voice came from the darkness. Mary looked around, trying to locate the small voice. You can hear me, can't you? I'm over here. The voice was difficult to locate. Was it in front of me? Was it above? Mary looked and looked until her eyes fell on a tree. The tree's trunk was thin and light grey. It did not appear to have any bark on it. Her eyes raised from the trunk to the slender branches. It reminded Mary of a ballerina's legs. They were so fine and delicate. From the branches, there was an explosion of pink flowers that covered the entire tree. It was magical, spectacular, and beautiful. The pink petals were like tiny fractal stars. They looked like if you touched them, they would crumble underneath your fingertips. I am up here, Mary, the voice whispered above her. Hiding amongst the pink flowers was a small figure. It was a sickly grey colour. It reminded Mary of how her mother looked just before she died. The small creature had two tiny black slits, which looked like it was its eyes. There was no light in there, only darkness. The beast had a bright pink kimono on, decorated with the same flowers that were on the tree. How do you know my name? Mary's voice was uncertain and trembled as the words danced past her lips. A big smile appeared on the creature's face. It was unnaturally large, and it seemed to cover its entire face. Mary, I know many things, and I've been watching over you since your mother passed away. How about I tell you a secret? I can grant wishes. Mary, if you take me home with you, I'll grant yours. There was a trace of laughter in its voice as it spoke. This thing took Mary aback. How did it know about her mother? And was it really magical? Could it grant wishes? All right, Mary whispered to the creature. Suddenly, it was on Mary's shoulder. She couldn't see it move from the tree, but she felt its weight resting on her body. Mary, my name is Miko, and I will be your friend from now on. You will see. Mary couldn't see Miko, but she could feel his sinister smile. A few days had passed since Miko came to live with Mary. Mary sat Miko on her study desk. They would talk deep into the night, and Miko would share mystical stories about his home in the Sakura tree. One night, her father burst into her room. A hot anger was in his eyes. Since Miko had come to live with her, Mary had noticed that her father's rage was getting worse. Mary's father was a large man. His short, red hair looked like a raging fire, and his eyes glowed a deep hazel. Those eyes used to be full of compassion and love, but since he started drinking, they were full of hatred. Mary felt that her father blamed her for the death of her mother. Who the hell are you talking to, Mary? His voice boomed painfully in her ears. No one, father. Honestly, no one. Fear was rising in the pit of her stomach. Without warning, her father raised his hand and it hurtled towards Mary's face. There was a loud crack as his hand impacted the side of her face. She could feel the force rattle through her jaw and travel to the base of her skull. It was like a swarm of hungry bees buzzing around in her mind. Liar! Who are you talking to? Are you moaning to your mother again about what a bad father I am? He screamed at her. His face was flushed red. He didn't look like a human anymore, but a savage beast. Another blow came for Mary. Tears streamed down her face, and she cried out loudly, but the impacts kept coming and coming. Eventually his rage subsided, and the blood drained from his face. Mary's beautiful face was red and swollen. Blood dribbled down from the edge of her mouth, running down her chin, dripping onto her silk nightgown. Her father looked at her. She could see that he was beginning to feel remorse, but the same look always came after these beatings. He turned on his heel and slunk out of the room like a wounded dog. Like a dog, he would be back. Pulling herself up to a chair, She stared at Miko. It sat there, grinning at her, its hands folded deep within its pink kimono. Your wish is granted. His eyes locked onto hers, and his smirk grew. Reaching up instinctively, her hands groped for her heart. It was burning. The pain was radiating out through her pores. Suddenly her legs buckled out from under her, and there was a loud bang as her knees slammed into the floor. Darkness started to cover her sight. It started from the edge of her vision and moved inwards. Something was wrong. The world went dark as she fell forward towards the floor. Even though Mary's eyes were closed, something didn't feel right. Her eyes flickered open. The room looked different. It seemed larger than before. Looking around, she realized that she was sitting on something that didn't seem quite right. Her back was pressed against something that was uncomfortably cold. A figure moved in the edge of her periphery. It took her a moment to process what she was looking at. Mary realized she was looking at herself. "Good morning, Mary." "Whoops, Miko." A girlish laugh surprised her. "How?" was all Mary could ask. Miko's haggard voice left her lips. "You wish for a life like mine, and I granted it, silly girl. You will be forever stuck in that body, undying. But you have no magic. I kept that all to myself." Mary's laugh got louder and colder by the second. Did she really wish for that? Of course not. She'd been tricked somehow. Looking up at her old body, she realized there was no mark on her. Mary discovered her body was also more matured. It no longer seemed like that of a lanky teenager, but more like a woman in her 20s. "I'm going to deal with Father now, Miko. And I will be back," she whispered seductively. Miko left the room, leaving Mary behind. She walked with a purpose. Her hips swung as she walked. "I could get used to this form," Miko thought to himself. Mary's father was asleep in bed, an empty bottle of whiskey still in his hand. "Daddy, are you awake, Daddy?" Mary's voice dripped with sweetness and poison. Her father moaned in a hungover haze. "Is that you, Emma?" His voice slurred. "No, Daddy, it is me, Mary. I will take care of you." Like she wouldn't. Lifting up the blanket, Miko slid into bed and snuggled up to the barely conscious man. Her long fingers started tracing his neck, slowly moving down his chest. Mary's father moaned softly, not realizing who was touching him. Pressing a little harder, Miko's long fingers started to break the skin, and a droplet of blood emerged from the flesh. The blood followed Miko's fingers like a lost little puppy looking for a new home. Mary's father's eyes flew open as pain receptors came alive. Miko's fingers pressed hard into his stomach, and the flesh parted for its new hosts. "Mary, what are you doing?" he screamed, and pain flooded out of his mouth. He attempted to grab the hand that was going into his stomach, but it was no good. She was too strong for him. His strength was fading by the second. "Daddy, thank you for freeing me from that hell," Miko whispered as her hands pulled out his insides. As the light escaped his eyes, he locked onto Mary's eyes, realizing in horror they were not his daughter's eyes, but they belonged to something else. "Oh, Daddy, you left me too soon." "Oh, well," Miko chuckled as she started to lick the blood off her fingers. "Guess I better go and tell Mary the good news now. No more Daddy to hurt her." Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's lullaby. If you enjoy my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. I've noticed from the analytics that 80% of you are not subscribed to my channel. So if you think that my stories are good, please drop me a subscribe. And remember, keep watching for what's in the dark.